welcome back, our faithful listeners. This is still Alexei and Dr. Welton. And now we'll be talking about the topic of forgiveness. So, you told us that you got a grant with your friend to study that.
Right, it was funded by the Templeton Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went to this conflict resolution center in the city of Buffalo.
Is it New York? Okay, Buffalo, New York.
And in this particular study, we dealt with individuals who were splitting up.
Mm-hmm.
So some of these were married couples who were in the process of divorcing.
And those were Christians or not Christians?
It's not a Christian agency.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Most of the cases had come through family court.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a couple splitting up, not treating each other very well. In the process of splitting up, one of them gets mad and says, "I'm taking you to court." Goes to court, tries to get a hearing against you, and the court says, I think you'd be better off sitting across the table with a trained mediator and talking through your problem rather than sitting in front of a judge.
Mm-hmm.
And so the family court sent the case to this center.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the individuals, I'm sure, had not been married, but had been living together.
Mm-hmm.
In some cases, in maybe most of the cases, they had children. So when you've got children, even though you're splitting up, you're going to have a continuing relationship with one another.
Yeah,
because you've got
one
a
way or
child
another.
who needs to be parented,
Mm-hmm.
who needs love from both of you, who needs support, etc.
Right.
And so if you don't resolve your issues at some reasonable level,
Mm-hmm.
the child's going to pay the bill in the end, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so the objective, sometimes you're negotiating money,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you're negotiating things you bought together, who gets this, who gets that. But the most important thing is that you're discussing how you're going to rear the child,
Mm-hmm.
who's going to have, what the custody arrangements are going to be, and those sorts of things. So that's what the couple is dealing with as they come together. We, of course, are interested in getting data so we can run statistics on various aspects of their relationship and the extent to which they are moving toward a forgiveness. Am I going to continue just harboring this anger for years or decades?
Mm-hmm.
Or are we going to work through it, speak civilly with one another, promise to, honor the relationships that the other has with the children, etc.
Right.
And so, we gathered lots of data. We found generally a fairly high level of forgiveness. These individuals responded pretty positively,
Mm-hmm.
At least on the paperwork, saying that they were, moving toward a forgiving attitude.
Mm-hmm.
Probably two of the best predictors of whether you would forgive or not
Mm-hmm.
involved your ability to understand the other person. So we can call it perspective taking.
Mm-hmm.
And we looked at that from two angles. We looked at it from an emotional level, and we also looked at it from a cognitive level.
So what are these levels?
Well, I mean, the cognitive perspective taking, to what extent can I understand the struggles and issues and concerns that you have?
Mm-hmm.
So instead of just being angry and mad at you, can I come to some understanding that, these were the struggles that you were dealing with, and how these struggles impacted your thinking and our relationship. And so, I mean, we use standard measures to measure how well you could understand each other at a cognitive level. And then the other one is more like empathy, how well you can understand each other at an emotional level.
Yeah, the cognitive, I think I do understand this, but how about emotional? How can you understand somebody's emotions?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me just say that before we did our study on forgiveness, most of the research focused on that question of empathy. And most of the research said that when you empathically understand, when you can sort of put yourself into their position and get some understanding of their emotional reactions, emotional frustrations, etc., then it's easier for you to work toward and establish forgiveness.
But not the cognitive.
The cognitive one hadn't been studied very much.
Mm-hmm.
Our data certainly supported the role of empathy. That empathy is perhaps the single best predictor of who forgives. That when you empathically understand the struggles of the other person, it's easier for you to forgive. However, we found that when you add cognitive perspective taking to the mix and include both of them in your equation, then you can predict even better who's going to forgive or the extent to which they achieve forgiveness. So, I mean, this is a part of conflict management, being able to understand that just because I see the world this way doesn't mean you necessarily have to see the world the same way.
Right.
And that I give you the freedom to have your own emotions, that I don't expect you to, have the same emotional reaction that I do, etc. Understanding each other emotionally and cognitively will help you resolve the conflict, and part of the way that happens is that it helps you establish that forgiveness.
Yeah, that's the whole concept of forgiving somebody reminds me of what Jesus told, like, well, he was asked, like, how many times should I forgive my brother? Like, 7 times? But then God, nope, 77 times 7 or something. And like, and now if we look from emotional level and cognitive, like, I really have to understand that person.
Yeah. So just think about the Lord's Prayer. We, of course, in our church Sunday morning say that every week. Forgive us our debts.
As we forgive our debtors.
That's a really powerful, awesome, fearful sort of statement. I don't begin to forgive my debtors in a full, complete, perfect way.
Because it's impossible for us.
And
But
yet
then also,
God looks at me and sees the righteousness of Christ and perfectly forgives. So those are hard words for me to say every single Sunday. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors.
especially, it's a little bit irony, but I guess I guess Americans don't like to hear that. Oh, debt? No. I don't like it. Like, and now we read in the Lord's Prayer that we are debtors. Actually, we're not just sinners, but we are debtors.
Yeah.
That's quite a strong statement, strong words. Forgive our debts. So,
And then there is a parable that Christ told about an individual had a huge debt that was forgiven him, And then someone with a very small debt, he refused to forgive. And Christ said something like, as you have, you know, Christ will forgive you as you have forgiven others, that, you know, those who refuse to forgive will not be forgiven, kind of thing. I mean, I don't
Right.
remember the exact words,
Yeah,
but it's,
if I forgive you, shouldn't you do the same thing?
yeah.
Right?
And that's the same intense, really sort of concept of God
It's kind,
expects us to be forgiving individuals.
yeah, and it kind of relates to what we heard last Sunday evening about our desires and things that get between, like, oh, you want, you don't get, therefore you kill somebody. So, like, that person who owned just a little bit was put into prison just to get it. Like, I need it now. Give me my money or what? But yeah, to to the conclusion, like, could you try to wrap up everything that we talked about and give us um maybe some advice how
Uh-huh.
we should go about the coronavirus or just anything, forgiveness.
So I never envisioned 40 years ago how my life would develop.
Especially you didn't think that Russian will interview you. Like, oh
You're
no.
absolutely right. That wasn't on my bucket list for some reason.
Oh no, but
Nevertheless, going through and getting training,
hmm
um, college level, graduate level, training within your church,
and then PhD level.
and taking, doing each and every assignment responsibly,
hmm
such that your supervisors and bosses say, there's a good worker. And the next time a new responsibility comes up, I'm going to promote that worker. And who knows what sorts of assignments or activities or responsibilities might be there. I never envisioned the kinds of things I'm doing now
hmm
in work, in the church, etc. I certainly never envisioned when I became an elder of the church that we would be moving into a pandemic and that
Yeah.
50% of our meeting time would be spent on what guidelines are we going to provide in our church for
hmm
worship, etc. Um, but nevertheless, taking advantage of um, educational opportunities, taking
hmm
advantage of the wisdom of those around us.
Right.
God is preparing us through all of those avenues for future lines of service. And I don't
hmm
know what your life is going to look like 1 year from now, as opposed to 10 or 20 years from now.
Yeah.
But God calls us to be faithful, and who knows what opportunities God will open up for you.
Yeah. And love each other. Maybe not be kind, but love. But yeah, sometimes people, I would say, confuse with being love somebody and be kind to somebody.
Absolutely.
So
Sometimes the kind thing to do is rough.
yeah, absolutely.
So here we are in the pandemic era. Again, something we never expected to be in. And day by day, we face certain frustrations, and we didn't choose to live our lives this way on this day, but nevertheless, God calls us to be faithful. And He will use this time for His honor and His glory.
Well, yeah, some people I know used to to do things that they otherwise would never have done. Like some of them are like, okay, I have more free time. Why not to do some um, seminary or watch some smart videos about God and just spend more time in the Word, or again spend more time with the family and not hate each other.
Here we go.
So, yeah, Dr. Welton, I really appreciate your time and all the answers that you gave us. And also, thank you very much for joining us and watching it. I hope it was also helpful to you. God bless you.